But now, is it time for everyone to work a 4-day week? 0207 862 2222 is the number. South Cambridgeshire District Council ran a trial, and independent analysis of that trial showed that it had major benefits. There are now calls for a nationwide trial. The principle is a shorter working week with no less pay and no reduction in productivity. So should it become a standard for everyone, or would it just be unfair on those who can't make it work for them, like hospitality workers, for example? Interestingly, the supermarket chain Asda has scrapped its plans to implement a 4-day week because they were just trying to condense all the hours which were left, and that meant the staff were working 11-hour days and they were exhausted. So what do you think? Could it work? Would it work? 0207 862 2222, and we'll speak to you in just a moment. Owen, you work a 4-day week.
No, do I?
Well, I don't know. That's what I've been told.
No.
You don't?
I don't.
Okay.
No, I don't know where that's come from.
Do you work a 7-day week?
I mean, to be honest, I work, in practice I will, I mean, when we talk about the 4-day week, what this actually applies to is people who work as employees for firms. I mean, in my case, I work voluntarily for 7 days a week. That's on my own, my own steam. I should probably chill out a bit. I don't work 7 days a week. I mean, normally, I'll try and take time off at the weekend, but I have to juggle lots of different things. What I would say about the reason this works, the idea of the 4-day week, is we've had all these pilots and there's a 4-day week campaign in Britain, and they've brought together companies and they've done these pilots and they've all worked out a tremendous success. And I'll give you an example. Perpetual Guardian is this corporate firm in New Zealand. I interviewed their owner. And he was reading on the plane back to New Zealand that research suggested that work is only genuinely productive for 2 hours and 53 minutes a day. And he introduced this 4-day week for his firm. He found that stress levels fell by 15%, job satisfaction increased, customer engagement went up by 1/3, internet surfing went down by over 1/3. He found as well that they didn't lose any revenue, they saved money on costs because of energy bills, also sick pay, people were less likely to go on sick over the course of the year. I went to this games firm in Shoreditch, just down the road from here, who also did it. It's this very cool, it's called Big Potato Games. They introduced it, and again, they found the same thing. They actually found it was good for productivity. There were other really good perks as well, or not perks, advantages. The cost of childcare in this country is horrific, as indeed you know. And so, the women I spoke to there who had kids, they put it out that they were saving actually quite a significant amount on childcare by having that extra day. But the point about this firm is, they still, by the way, there's flexibility. Sometimes there might be a conference on Friday, something that has to happen. But overall, a 4-day week for them, it made the company, it was more productive, profitability was good, and that's been the same with all these pilots.
Well, that's all sounding very good. Why don't we just do it, Dehenna?
Well, I think Owen's kind of hit the nail on the head. For those companies, it worked. And my concern is, I don't like blanket policies on business where we can avoid it, right? I think for some sectors, for some industries, this is the way forward. And I've worked before I was an MP in a very flexible workplace where I didn't have working hours, I had targets. And if I hit my targets in 3 days, I could take the other 2 days off. I mean, we didn't, because we were all invested in the company and we'd usually do 5 days. But to know we had that flexibility meant there was kind of so much less stress on our shoulders, which was lovely. And I think looking at the gains that were made in the South Cambridge trial, improvements in staff retention, improvements in productivity, basically hardly any of the services saw any productivity losses. Obviously, I think it's something that should be considered, but I do think where there are front-facing services where that customer engagement is needed, so I think about face-to-face counsel services, I think about GP appointments, I think about those. I think there is a different argument to be had there because that face-to-face interaction over a number of hours is really important.
OK, let's go to the callers and see whether you would support a 4-day working week. Diane from Turvine, what's your view on this one?
I think it's a wonderful idea, Storm. Hello, panel. I think it's a wonderful idea.
Do you work for a company or do you own a company?
No, I'm retired now, Storm, but my daughter used to work for a famous department store, and every person they had in, they would had little hours, so they was there for They used to be there for 5 days, and probably didn't only used to get 16 hours. They wouldn't give them 8-hour contracts, And everybody was complaining, They had to keep going in there, and you catch a bus, and the bus fare was that dear. It'd take 2 hours out of their pay. It was absolutely ridiculous.
Diane, actually, you bring up another really good point. Just the commuting expenses you would miss for one day, and that would save a lot of people a lot of money and a lot of heartache and a lot of just anger. I think a lot of people get what they're commuting. Less traffic, better for the environment, absolutely. However, we're talking about small companies. Small to medium businesses do, that's what this country stands on a lot of the time. Small businesses are going to really struggle.
Can I be cheeky? Can I be very cheeky?
Of course, Owen,
Can I say about Owen, I'm so glad he's gone green. I'm really glad, because it must have been hard for Owen to come out of Labour, but I'm so glad he did, because he knows.
Bless you,
big supporter.
But also, Dan, to hear your.
Supporter of Owen, he's the best ever.
I'm definitely not the best ever, but Diane, just hearing your wonderful Welsh accent, honestly, beautiful. My it must be genetic. My Welsh ancestors would be delighted to hear that.
Thank you for your call, and thank you for being cheeky. We like that.
These are small and medium companies. Almost all of the companies involved in the pilot are small and medium companies.
But I think some small, medium companies, as Dehenna says, might struggle, particularly if they're front-facing and they need the staff there and present. Diane, thank you. Paul from Greater Manchester, do you think that this is something that we should roll out, particularly maybe in the public sector?
Hello, everybody. Yeah, I definitely do, and I'd go even further than this. I'd advocate for a 3-day working week or a 3.5-day working week. The problem we've got is people are living to work at the minute. We get a short time to live on this earth, and people are working and not having any time for pleasure, and they're not having any time to enjoy life. So, and also automation's coming in. So them jobs are going. We're constantly hearing our robots are taking this job, that job. So people are going to have to work less. 3 days is enough for anybody to be working. And it's compassionate. And also, when my grandma was younger, she used to work a 6-day working week. She used to have 2 half-day holidays, I think. And we've gone from the 6-day working week for many people to 5 days. And we've been at this stage for ages now. So it's time we took the plunge, went for a 4-day working week, and in time a 3-day working week with the same wage as well. Not
the same wage and the same productivity. It does mean, though, potentially people will be doing much longer days in those 3 days in order to get the same workload done. But you make a great point, Paul, that actually back in the day lots of people would have worked 7 days, they would have worked 6 days. Absolutely. Where did the 5-day come from? We've just made it up, so why don't we readdress it, Dehenna, to have it more balanced between work and our family and private life?
Well, obviously we have restrictions on the number of hours that people can work at the moment, and post-working time directive, etc., which I think is probably a good thing, so that people aren't being completely exploited at any point. But of course, I know people who've worked 2-3 jobs. I've worked 3 jobs in my time to try and pay my bills and make ends meet, which is stressful. But people do it in order to kind of get on. But I think, again, I just don't like blanket restrictions on businesses. I think it's for individual businesses to decide. The only thing that worries me about this is a lot of the jobs involved are the more kind of clerical professional jobs. And I worry about the people who are manufacturing, who are doing things where it takes a certain number of minutes to make a product, where you can't increase productivity.
So it's not just a blanket for everyone. James from the Shetland Isles, from Shetland, we would say. James, what do you say to a 4-day working week? Do you appreciate that some businesses won't be able to make this work?
Well, if it was a 4-day working week of 10 hours a day, it should be viable with our present system. But it's basically aimed at people working in offices. Mm-hmm. I'm afraid people who actually produce things other than paper and reports and other bloody rubbish are not in this kind of thing. I can remember when I was an engineer and I was dealing with emergencies.
Yeah, and I mean, it might be hard to get the staffing just for a 4-day week for something like that. I'm only having to rush you, James, because I'm running out of time here, but I appreciate your comment that actually it's not necessarily going to work for everything. But where it does work, maybe it should be considered. I don't know. We'll see if they roll it out. Thank you very much for all your calls. We're going to have to move on.